First of all, let's define that the word Russian in our understanding means world understanding, a measure of nraviousness, belonging to a civilizational commonality, and not a denotation in a passport, not a nationality. This is really so, because even opening an encyclopedia, you will read the great Russian poet A.S. Pushkin, the great Russian artist Isaac Levitan. They, like many others, were not Russian by nationality, but no one doubts their belonging to a special Russian culture, different from the culture of other civilizational commonalities. This perception of the word Russian is present at the unconscious levels of the psyche of our people, and it manifests itself through the speech that has taken shape, through the vocabulary, through the lexicon. Phrases like Немецкий человек, a German person, Американский человек, an American person, Грузинский человек, a Georgian person. These phrases do not sound pleasant. But Русский человек, a Russian person, has a definite, determined sound, like a Western person or an Eastern person. Russian is an encompassing concept in relation to the nationality. After all, Русский немец, a Russian German, Русский еврей, a Russian Jew, will not become either German or Jewish Russian even after moving to Germany or Israel. A feature of Russian regional civilization, which united many fragmented principalities, is concluded in the fact that the Russian civilizational and state borders within the former USSR coincided, in contrast to the biblical Western or Eastern civilizations. That is why, when viewed superficially, Rus is perceived as one of these states, being in essence a civilization of global significance. The West is the civilization of matter, the East is the civilization of spirit, Russia is the civilization of measure.
How can one characterize the interrelationship of Russia with the rest of the world at the civilization level?
In the past, they came to civilize Russia from the East, South, and West. All of them, from the dogs of the knights to Napoleon and the Nazis, found their deaths in Russia. This is a historical regularity conditioned by the spirituality of the participants of the events. Our contemporaries, who intend to civilize Russia in a Western manner, still have time to think about this regularity of history, for the sword does not cut off the guilty head, and the one who is violently obsessed will break one's own neck. A.S. Pushkin also warned them. He understood this principle of supranational civilizational governance. Then send us your numbers without number, your maddened sons, your goaded slaves. In Russia's plains there's room to slumber, and well they'll know their brethren's graves.
Viktor Alexeyevich, could you describe the system of civilizational governance?
If one does not relate to the epics as groundless fairy tales, then one can see that the highest civilizational power in ancient Rus society belonged to that little-known social group which the epics call Kaliks, Volks, Magi. They taught to live in harmony with the environment and with God's providence. The essence of their activity is reflected in the Song of Prophetic Oleg. No magus has fear of the mightiest lords, nor welcomes their gifts when they're given. Authentic and free are our Vatical words, and matched to the wisdom of heaven. These highest governors lived on the basis of the sense of measure, and never stood out by wealth. Promotion into the system of the highest power proceeded not on the basis of electoral procedures, but through the mastery of knowledge about the system of social governance. Hundreds of years before the Euro-American conglomerate, without fanfare and noise, they solved such civilizational tasks on the vast territory of many principalities as one language, one currency, one system of measures, that is, those issues that are only being approached by Western civilization. So Russia, at least since the capture of Kazan, has been a regional civilization within the boundaries of one multinational state, in which internal wars are episodes but not norms of existence. 100 Years' War, 30 Years' War, these are from the history of the West, not Russia. Our civilization developed peacefully internally, without exterminating anyone. As for the West, remember at least the Native Americans. For a long time, it had a hierarchically echeloned system of governance, resistant to all invasions, both forceful and informational. The statehood in it is only one of the echelons of governance, not the highest in their hierarchy. Follow the history. After each compression of Russia, under the pressure of military or information external aggression, the civilized accordion Russia straightened out, additionally absorbing adjacent territories. So it will happen again this time. If the West does not come to its senses in time, then Russia can become a civilization from the Pacific to the Atlantic Oceans due to the total resource energy dependence of Europe on Russia.
Could you point out any features of our civilization?
Their essence lies in the fact that Russia, in its pan-civilizational development, is more perfect than the West. This is not clear only to those who have a consumerism parasitic relationship to the planet Earth, on the principle, after us, even the flood. In Rus, however, humanity was always perceived as part of the biosphere of the planet, and we strived, as Chuchev noted, to get the territorial commonality wreathed by love, but not by blood. Unfortunately, for the last hundreds of years, humanity, including our country, having fallen under the leadership of the West, has been making a deeply erroneous civilizational zigzag, when, without having comprehended life, the role and place of humanity in the biosphere of the Earth and cosmos, humanity identified progress not with the mastery of the potential of development by man himself, but with a purely technological, technogenic development. Fortunately, we are not the leaders of these tendencies. After all, the long-term perspective of these so-called successes will be such as it is stated in the Bible. But many that are first shall be last, and the last first. The Gospel of Mark 10:31. Already now we can note with satisfaction that Russia has preserved 40% of the virgin territory inherited from God, China 20%, the USA 10%, Europe 0%. One can lay asphalt all over the earth and build concrete boxes, but you will not be able to get again what God has gifted you. It is no coincidence that the words bogatstvo, gift, wealth, and Bog, God, are words of the same root in the Russian language.
In other words, you think that our current aspirations to assimilate Western values are erroneous.
In my opinion, many have already managed to evaluate these values, from overseas sausages to bush legs to, if one may say so, art, music, cinema. Our society receives, albeit painful, but curative inoculation from all that shit and evil that are the essence of Western civilization. Those who understand the global historical process simply consider it beneath their dignity to enter into polemics with the current oracles of civilizationists in the Western manner. All of them, in any of the civilizationally significant questions, simply have not come out of the age when the diaper is an inevitable attribute of life. Keep to forgiveness and enjoin kindness, and turn away from the ignorant, says the Quran.
Viktor Alexeyevich, could you give an example from modern life of the, as you assert, civilizational ignorance of the West?
Sure. With a zeal worthy of better application, the West cultivates sexual promiscuity, reproaching Rus for lagging behind in these matters. Have you ever wondered why chastity has always been revered in the history of Russian civilization? The fact is that for centuries, chastity developed and strengthened the genetics of offspring, although this was not always achieved on the basis of conscious information. Family ancestral lines that did not maintain chastity disappeared through natural selection due to the destructive effect of telegony. The fact is that the conception and development of a child is connected not only with his primary female and male cells, but is largely determined by the biofield processes accompanying the maturation of the fetus. If a woman has had only one partner, then the development of such a fetus takes place with full harmony of the material, biological component, and the accompanying energy information biofield characteristics of the father and the mother. If several partners, then the development of the fetus takes place under the serious impact of the biofield characteristics of each of them that are also present in the mother's biofield, and they deform it inadequately in relation to the initial genetic material. In this case, a child is born who has inherited many of the biofield characteristics also of other partners, which leads to disharmony in the process of his development. It was because of this that the Russian people condemned the seduction of future mothers, and we even had a corresponding concept, to spoil the maid. As it is known, the Quran introduces a total prohibition on marriage with a woman who has had sexual intercourse before marriage. In science, This effect of the destruction of bloodline genetics is called the telegony effect. The strong impact of the biofield characteristics of each of the sexual partners on the newborn is a long ago established fact. The effect of telegony is especially clearly confirmed at the level of the animal world. Repeated attempts to mate a male zebra with a female horse did not end with conception. However, the female horse, having mated with a male horse after this, gave birth to striped-like zebra offspring. So, the chastity stored in the soul of the Russian people is not a sign of darkness and lagging behind from the pseudo-civilized world, but a sign of true civilization, coming from the depths of centuries. That is why it was revealed at the just-held World Forum of Physicists that 80% of these so-called foreigners were born, raised, and trained in Russia. Our people have unrivaled intellect and genetics, as well as the tradition of Russian chanting. We do not have the opportunity to detailize this topic. We only note that those who understand this name it vocal therapy, which is capable of healing the human organism. The imposed rhythmics, inadequate to our genetics, inevitably destroys the organism. Let us not forget that unlike other types of arts, music, bypassing your willpower, is always directly loaded into the unconscious levels of the psyche.
You mentioned the Quran, and I spotted a discrepancy in your reasoning. We know the prophets of Eastern civilization, Muhammad, Buddha. We also know Jesus Christ as the prophet of Western, as you say, biblical civilization. If Russia is a civilization, why does it not have its own prophets?
Public recognition and proclamation as prophets and their real presence in life are two different things. If by prophets we mean those people who received systemic knowledge, revelations from the highest reason, from God, then we had them in Rus, but in thick books and in large print runs, they published those prophets whom the earthly hierarchies managed to integrate into the scenarios developed by them. Among the works of special significance in terms of understanding the nature of prophets is the work of A.S. Pushkin, the Gabrieliad. This work of his helps to understand the nature of the official proclamation of prophets, as well as why there were no prophets in the history of Russian civilization. In his work, A.S. Pushkin shows that Jesus Christ was formed and used simultaneously in three scenarios. As always, he shows the information in an encrypted form. The content of the Gabrieliad boils down to the fact that God, the Archangel Gabriel, symbolizing the egregorial church level, and the serpent tempter, took part in the conception of Jesus Christ. As a result, Jesus Christ, although he was a previous one who received the revelations from above, but bypassing consciousness he was used by egregorial levels, church hierarchies, to solve their earthly problems, and finally, by satanic forces that violate humanity and shed rivers of blood with crosses in their hands and with the name of Christ on their lips. Take the example of American priests, who, as it turns out now, are engaged in debauchery with juveniles. The pravias, whom the pseudo-jretzes over the past 3,000 years have not been able to fit into the scenario, are not declared prophets. The pravias in Rus were Seraphim of Sarov, Sergius of Radonezh. I also look at Pushkin as a prophet of Russian civilization. Listen to how, at the age of 18, he reveals the secret of the prophets of the Gabrieliad. Hist! Unlike the tales of Moses minds no error, to flatter your Jehovah I'm not bought, to tell tall tales poor Jews to keep in terror. Moses was paid well for his sycophancy, but I'm no fake seer, nor smug history Nancy. A.S. Pushkin, undoubtedly by his bloodline genetics, belonged to the systems of Jretshood initiation. In him, on his father's side, the knowledge of the Holy Rus, Slavic, and on his mother's side, the ancient Egyptian Jretshood were combined. The depth of his penetration into the secrets of life can be judged even by some rare plots, where he gives information in a direct, uncoded form. Think about whether the person who wrote, for example, the following could write fairy tales for children. Graze, if you will, you peaceful nations, who never rouse at honor's horn. Should flocks heed freedom's invocations, their part is to be slain or shorn. Their dower the yoke their sires have worn, through snug and sheepish generations. But Pushkin rarely gave information in an open form. He encoded it.
And what do you mean by the encoding of information by Pushkin?
If you read the fables of I. Krylov or Aesop, then in advance you tune yourself not into direct reading, the way a child can perceive the fable, but into the second semantic line, human dignity and vices in the images of animals. Behind each of Pushkin's characters, there is a particular social phenomenon or hierarchy of governance. Hence the mystery, attractiveness, and even some mysticism of many of his immortal creations. With the encoding system itself, he shows that real changes in a person's life can be achieved only in the fight against social phenomena, and not with specific people who are often hostages of the prevailing circumstances, the vicious conception, or conceptually non-determined decisions of power. If you simply read such works by Pushkin as The Bronze Horseman, The House in Kolomna, then there you will not find anything but an entertaining, twisting plot. Everything is banal and fits into one paragraph of a text. A completely different picture will appear before you if you enter into the second semantic line. On its basis, our analytical group has given decodings of such works as Ruslan and Lyudmila, The Bronze Horseman, The House in Kolomna. These decodings make Pushkin's works in these symbols harmonious and logical from beginning till end. The system of supranational governance towards Russian civilization is presented by Pushkin in his poem Ruslan and Lyudmila. It is important to understand that Lyudmila, Lyud-mili, means dear, sweet, loved people, Slavic peoples. Lyudmila is kidnapped and taken away to the country of mountains, Switzerland. This is done by Chernamor with a long beard, which has always been a symbol of the usurious banking system. That day is not far off, the day when Ruslan, symbolizing our team, will cut off with the sword of knowledge and distinction the long usurious beard that has entangled Russia. The disclosure of this knowledge will mean a global enlightenment of our people, of all humanity.